cleanse the naughtinesses we had committed up in the home of the brave and the land of the free. That almost empty baggie of grass behind the bureau never crossed our minds. Mommy had a maid from the island who lived with us in the States. She, Primitiva, had found the stash. Primi herself used baggies in her practice of layman's Santaha, concocting powders and potions to make this ache or that rival woman go away. But why the girls would have a baggie of oregano in their room was unmistaho she deferred to her mistress to solve. As we later reconstructed it from what Primi said, Mommy's first reaction was anger that we had broken her rule against eating in our bedrooms. Oregano qualified as food. But when she opened the baggie and took a sniff and poked her finger in and tasted a pinch and had Primitiva do the same, they were flabbergasted. The dreaded and illegal marijuana that was lately so much in the news. Mommy was sure of it. And here she'd been, worried sick about protecting our virginity since we'd hit puberty in this land of wild and loose Americans, and vice had entered through an unguarded orifice at the other end. Immediately, she contacted Tio Pedro, a psychiatrist, uncle by affection, with a practice in Jackson Heights. Tio Pedro was always consulted when one or the other of us daughters got into trouble. He identified the oregano most surely as grass, and got Mommy free associating about what else we might be up to. By the time she touched down on the island 48 hours after finding the baggie, we were all addicts, fallen women with married lovers and illegitimate babies on the way. One teensy hope she held onto was that a workman or a house guest had left the pot there. She had come to find out the truth, shielding Poppy from the news and the heart attack he would surely die of if he knew. Since we were caught by surprise, we didn't have a plan. At first, Carla made a vague attempt to discredit Tio Pedro by revealing how he always ended our sessions with long hugs and a pat on the butt. He's a lek, she accused. And besides, what does St. Peter know of grass? Grass. Mommy scowled. This is marijuana. Carla held her tongue. Before we could come up with a better approach, Fifi surprised us by admitting that the baggie was hers. Instantly, we all rallied to her guilty side. It's mine too, Yo-Yo claimed. And mine, Carla and Sandy chimed in. Mommy's eyes shifted from one to the other, each cry of mine. Confirming another bad daughter. She wore her tragic look of the Madonna with delinquent children. All of you? She asked in a low, shocked voice. Fifi stepped forward. I tell you it was me who put it there, I did it, and they, she pointed to us, they had nothing to do with it. Technically, she was right. It was her baggie. The rest of us had had dope only when our boyfriends rolled a joint or when, in a party of friends, a cigarette made its rounds, everyone drawing a toke. Still, there was something untoward about Fifi taking all the blame since our habit had been to share the good and the bad that came our way. She gave Mommy an impassioned apology and argument her sisters should not be punished along with her. Oddly enough, Mommy consented. She asked us, though, not to tell Poppy unless we wanted wholesale island confinement. It's possible that Mommy had her own little revolution brewing, and she didn't want to blow the whistle on her girls and thus call attention to herself. Recently, she had begun spreading her wings, taking adult courses in real estate and international economics and business management, dreaming of a bigger-than-family-size life for herself. She still did lip service to the old ways, while herself nibbling away at forbidden fruit. Anyhow, she agreed that the three oldest of us could go back to our school at the end of the summer. Fifi was given the choice of either staying on the island for a year at Tia Carmen's or going back to the States, but not to her boarding school. She would have to live at home with Mommy and Poppy and attend the local Catholic school. Fifi opted to stay. Better one of a dozen chaperoned cousins, she figured, than home alone with Mommy and Poppy breathing down her neck and Peter Pan with his hand on her ass. Besides, I wanna try it out here. Maybe I'll like it, Fifi said, defending her choice to us. As the youngest of the four, she had had the least chance to bond to the island before our abrupt exile almost a decade before. And besides, the States aren't making me happy. You're in the middle of your adolescence, for God's sake. Carla had decided to major in psych and had been giving all of us frequent free analysis. You're supposed to be unhappy and confused. It means you're normal, well-adjusted. This is just going to make it worse, I guarantee it. Maybe it won't, maybe I'll surprise you, said Fifi. You'll be climbing these walls before the year is out, Carla warned. We looked beyond the pool at the high stone wall. Down a ways one of the maids had draped her underclothes on the wall. In the cup of a brazier, his little head hardly visible, a lizard was blowing out his throat as if he had just taken a toke and were holding it in until the small dazed cells of his brain zinged a hit. By Christmas, we are wild for news of Fifi's exile. From Mommy we hear that our sister is beautifully acclimated to life on the island and taking classes in shorthand and typing at the Ford Foundation Trade School. She's also seeing someone nice. This, of course, is dangerous for the rest of us. With one successfully repatriated daughter, Poppy might yank us all out of college and send us back. Not to mention that it's out and out creepy that Fifi, the maverick, is so changed. Carla, in fact, says it's a borderline schizoid response to traumatic cultural displacement. The minute we step off the plane, we see Mommy has not exaggerated. Fifi, there to meet us at the airport, is a jangle of bangles in a cascade of beauty parlor curls held back on one side very smartly by a big gold barrette. She has darkened her lashes with black mascara so that her eyes stand out as if she were slightly startled at her good luck. Fifi, who used to wear her hair in her trademark, 2 Indian braids that she pinned up in the heat like an Austrian milkmaid. Fifi, who always made a point of not wearing makeup or fixing herself up. Now she looks like the after person in one of those before-after makeovers. In magazines. Elegante, Mommy has said of Fifi's new style, but on our lips are other epithets. She's turned into a.p, Yo-Yo mutters. A Spanish-American princess. My God, Fifi, we say in greeting, looking her over. Where's the party? Sandy teases. If you can't say something nice, Fifi begins, defensively. Her little patent leather pocketbook plaintively matches her pumps. Hey. We give her one of our huddle hugs. Don't lose your sense of humor on us, come on. You look great. Don't muss my hair, Fifi fusses, patting it down as if it were a hat. But she smiles. Guess what, you guys? She looks from one to the other of us. You're seeing someone nice, we chorus. Fifi is taken aback, then laughs. Yeah, old grapevine, huh? We nod. She goes on to explain that her someone nice is a cousin, Manuel Gustavo. A nice cousin, she is quick to add. A cousin. We know most of our cousins, and Manuel Gustavo is a new one on us. A closet cousin, Fifi says, searching her purse for a photo. One of the illegitimates. Right on. We sisters give each other the V for victory sign. It's still a guerrilla revolution after all. We were afraid that Fifi was caving into family pressure and regressing into some nice third world girl. But no way. She's still yet old Fifi. Fifi tells us the full story of Manuel Gustavo. His father is our father's brother, Tio Orlando, who has a half-dozen children from una mujer del campo, a woman from the countryside around one of his ranches. Of course, Tia Fidelina, our uncle's wife, who is sweet and dedicated to La Virgin, knows nothing about Tio Orlando's infidelities. But now that Manuel Gustavo is at the manger door, so to speak, his father has to come up with some explanation just short of immaculate conception. Who is this young man who is seeing her niece? Tia Fidelina wants to know. Where does he come from? What's his family name? Another uncle, Ignacio, offers to take Manuel Gustavo on as his own illegitimate son. He's never married and is always getting ragged about being homosexual. So 2 men are off the hook with 1 bastard. According to Fifi, the Aja Sociedad, the high-class ladies of the oligarchy who form a kind of club, not unlike a country club, are delighted by this juicy bit of gossip. They have nothing better to do, she concludes, drawing up her chin, above it all. We take Manuel on as our own favorite cousin. He looks like a handsome young double for Poppy, and a lot like us, the family eyebrows, the same high cheekbones, the full, generous mouth. In short, he could be the brother we never had. When he roars into the compound in his pickup, all 4 of us run down the driveway to greet him with kisses and hugs. Girls, Tia Carmen says, frowning, that's no way to greet a man. Yeah, you guys, Fifi agrees. Get off him, he's mine. We laugh, but we keep fussing over him, waiting on him as if we've never been to the States or read Simone de Beauvoir or planned lives of our own. But, as the days go by, Fifi grows withdrawn and watchful. Daily, there are little standoffs and pouts and cold shoulders because one of us has put her arm around Manuel or has gotten involved in a too lengthy conversation with him about the production of sugar cane. To reassure her, we tone ourselves down and become more reserved with Manuel. From this new distance, we begin to get the long view, and it's not so pretty. Lovable Manuel is quite the tyrant, a mini Poppy and Mommy rolled into one. Fifi can't wear pants in public. Fifi can't talk to another man. Fifi can't leave the house without his permission. And what's most disturbing is that Fifi, feisty, lively Fifi, is letting this man tell her what she can and cannot do. One day Fifi, who rarely reads anymore, becomes absorbed in one of the novels we brought along, and not a trashy one for once. Manuel Gustavo arrives, and when no one answers the door, comes in the back way. In the patio, all four of us are draped over lawn chairs reading. Fifi sees him and her face lights up. She is about to put aside her book, when Manuel Gustavo reaches down and lifts it out of her hands. This, Manuel Gustavo says, holding the book up like a dirty diaper, is junk in your head. You have better things to do. He tosses the book on the coffee table. Fifi pales, though her two blushed-on cheeks blush on. She stands quickly, hands on her hips, eyes narrowing, the Fifi we know and love. You have no right to tell me what I can and can't do. I can't know. Manuel challenges. No. Fifi asserts. One by one we three sisters exit, cheering Fifi on under our breaths. A few minutes later we hear the pickup roar down the driveway, and Fifi comes sobbing into the bedroom. Fifi, he asked for it / we say. Don't let him push you around. You're a free spirit / we remind her. But within the hour, Fifi is on the phone with Manuelito, pleading for forgiveness. We nickname him MG, a make of car we consider slightly sleazy, a car one of our older cousins might get his poppy to buy him to impress the island girls. We rev up imaginary motors at the mention of his name. He's such a tyrant. RRRRMM. He's breaking Fifi's spirit. RRRRMM. A few days after the book episode, Manuel Gustavo arrives for the noon meal, and since Fifi is still at her Spanish class, we decide to have a little talk with him. Yo-Yo begins by asking him if he's ever heard of Mary Wollstonecraft. How about Susan B. Anthony? Or Virginia Woolf? Friends of yours? He asks. For the benefit of an invisible sisterhood, since our aunts and girl cousins consider it very unfeminine for a woman to go around demonstrating for her rights, Yo-Yo sighs and all of us roll our eyes. We don't even try anymore to raise consciousness here. It'd be like trying for cathedral ceilings in a tunnel, or something. Once, we did take on Tia Floor, who indicated her large house, the well-kept grounds, the stone cupid who had been rerouted so it was his mouth that spouted water. Look at me, I'm a queen, she argued. My husband has to go to work every day. I can sleep until noon, if I want. I'm going to protest for my lights 7. Yo-Yo turns Manuel's interview over to Carla, who's good at befriending with small talk. Yo-Yo calls it her therapist softening them up for the spill mode. Manuel, why do you feel so upset when Fifi is on her own? Carla's manner is straight out of her Psych 101 textbook. Women don't do that here. Manuel Gustavo's foot, posed on his knee, shakes up and down. Maybe you do things different in your United States of America. His tone is somewhere between a tease and a taunt. But where does it get those gringas? Most of them divorce or stay Gemina, with nothing better to do than take drugs and sleep around. Sandy revs, RRRMM. Manuel, Carla pleads. Women do have rights here too, you know. Even Dominican law grants that. Yes, women have rights, Manuel Gustavo agrees. A wry smile spreads on his face, he is about to say something clever. But men wear the pants. The revolution is on. We have 1 week left to win the fight for our Fifi's heart and mind. Nights on the island we go out, the gang of cousins, to the Avenida. It's the main drag, happily crowded with cars and horse-drawn buggies for tourists who want to ride in moonlight by the seashore. Hotels and night spots flood the sky with so much light, you can make out people's faces as you cruise by. The gossip mill turns. Marianela was out on Ucho with Claudio. Margarita looks too pregnant for only 2 months since the wedding. Get a load of Pila's mini skirt with those huge legs of hers, you'd think some people would check their mirrors, geez. We distribute ourselves in several cars, driven by boy cousins. We don't want stool pigeon chauffeurs along. We're off to the movies or to Capri's for an ice cream and just hanging out, the boys much exhorted to take care of the ladies. As the oldest, Carla must ride with Fifi in Manuel's pickup, La Chaperona, at least until we're off compound grounds. Then she is dropped off at Capri's to join the rest of us. Fifi and Manuel steal off for some private time from the watchful eyes of the extended family. On these drives, they usually end up parking somewhere, only to neck and stuff, according to Fifi. She has admitted that the stuff is getting more and more to the point, and the problem is that she has no contraception. Anyone on the island she might go to for pills or a diaphragm would know who she is and would surely rat on her to the family. And Manuel won't wear a rubber. He thinks it might cause impotence, Fifi says, smiling sweetly, cherishing his cute male ignorance. Jesus, Fifi. Sandy sighs. Tell him that not using one most surely can cause pregnancy. A pregnant Fifi would have to do what is always done in such cases on the island, marry immediately and brace herself for the gossip when her premature baby comes out fat and fully grown. We keep warning her and worrying over her until she promises us on pain of our betrayal, we'll tell on you, we will, that she won't have sex with Manuel unless she gets some contraception first. Which is highly unlikely. Where can she go for it on this fishbowl island? But her word doesn't count for much after what happens one night. We're sitting around at Capri's that night, bored. Fifi and Manuel have already taken off, and we've got a couple of hours to kill before they get back and we can return to the compound. We start brainstorming what to do. We can drive to Embassy Beach and go skinny dipping. We can try to find our cousin of a cousin, Jorge, who often has a couple of joints and knows a voodoo priest who will tell us our futures after performing a scary animal sacrifice. Our official escort Mundin vetoes both ideas. He's got a better one. We pile into his car, his 3 American cousins and his sister Lucinda, nagging him about what he's got in mind. He grins wickedly and drives us a little ways out of town to Motel Los Encantos, motel being the island euphemism for a whorehouse. He pulls right in like he knows the place, honks the horn, asks the gatekeeper for a cabin, then heads for the one he's assigned. The garage door is opened by a waiting yard boy. Once we are out of the car, the yard boy pulls the garage door down and hands Mundin the key to the connected cabin. That way no one can tell who's here, Mundin explains in English. This is the high-class motel, la seem de la seem, not to get too gross. Everyone would know everyone else's car's here. Mundin unlocks the door to the cabin and stands aside to let the ladies in. An unabashed king-size bed made up with a flowered bedspread stands in the dead center of the room. There are a couple of rolled pillows with tassels at the head of the bed. Covered with the same wishy-washy flowered material as the spread, the pillows evoke an Arab engineer more than a lord and master of the harem. Is this all? We say, disappointed. What did Yad expect? Mundin is nonplussed at our lack of proper titillation. After all, he has risked getting into a lot of trouble to show us the naughty face of the island. Nice girls at a whorehouse. His mother would kill him. Sandy puts her arm around Mundin and bumps hips. She is doing her Mae West imitation just as the yard boy comes in with a tray of rum and cokes. He keeps his eyes on the tile floor as he goes from one to the other, proffering refreshments, as if to reassure us there will be no witnesses. As soon as he exits, we laugh. I wonder what he thinks. Carla shakes her head, just imagining it. Mundin wiggles his eyebrows. How many taboos can we break here? Let's see. He enumerates: incest, group sex, lesbian sex, virgin sex, virgin sex. Who are you talking about? His sister Lucinda challenges with a hand on her hip. Yeah, we concur, hands on our hips, facing him, a lineup of feminists. Mundin's eyes do a double blink. For all his liberal education in the States, and all his sleeping around there and here, and all his eager laughter when his Americanized cousins recount their misadventures, his own sister has to be pure. Let's go. He hurries us after we finish our rum and cokes. As we're backing out of our garage, a pickup passes behind us on the motel drive. Hey. Yo-Yo cries out. Is that Fifi and Manuel? Mundin chuckles. Hey, hey. Way to go. Way to go, way to schmo, Sandy snaps. That's our baby sister going in there with a guy who thinks condoms cause impotence. Go back in there after them. Carla orders Mundin. She's got her rights too. Mundin laughs pointedly as he drives through the gate, which the boy is already closing on our tail lights. This isn't funny, Carla warns as we consult in the bathroom back at Capri's. She's not going to come back home on her own, she's brainwashed. Sandy concurs. I mean, they wouldn't need a motel room if they weren't sleeping together. After she promised, Carla says, nodding, aggrieved. There, among the pink vanities with baskets of little towels and talcum powder and brushes, we come up with our plot. We reach out our hands and seal our pact. Yo-Yo rallies us with, JK Viva la Revolution. On top of our motel rum and cokes, we've had a few of Capri's famous frozen daiquiris. The young maid who has been listening to our English gibberish offers us a pink perfumed hand towel, which Sandy accepts and waves like the flag for our side. Our last Saturday night on the island, the compound folks sit on Tia Carmen's patio, reminiscing. Periodically, family stops by to say goodbye to our parents and deliver the packets of letters and bills they want mailed in the States. Now that Tio Mundo is in government, there are always other cabinet members and old friends coming over to shop talk politics and ask for favors. The patio is sex segregated. The men sit to one side, smoking their cigars and tinkling their rum drinks. The women lounge on wicker armchairs by the wall lamps, exclaiming over whatever there is to be exclaimed about. The young people take off for the Avenida, promising to be home early. Tonight, it's the regulars, Lucinda, Mundin, and Fifi and Manuel, of course, and the three of us. Carla does the usual chaperone duty in the pickup and then gets dropped off at Capri's. They're having some big fight, she confesses when she joins us. What now? Sandy asks. Same old thing, Carla sighs. Fifi spent too much time talking to Jorge and her skirt is too short and her jersey too tight. Blah, blah, blah. RMM, Sandy, and Yo-Yo Rev. Mundin laughs. Serves you girls right. We narrow our eyes at him. When he's in the States, where he went to prep school and is now in college, he's one of us, our buddy. But back on the island, he struts and turns macho, needling us with the unfair advantage being male here gives him. As usual, we're to wait for the lovers at Capri's. 20 minutes before our curfew, they'll pick up Carla, and we'll all head home again like one big happy group of virgin cousins. But tonight, as we've agreed, we're staging a coup on the same Avenida where a decade ago the dictator was cornered and wounded on his way to a tryst with his mistress. It was a plot our father helped devise but did not carry through, since by then we had fled to the States. Tonight, we are blowing the lovers' cover. First step is to get Mundin to drive us home. Male loyalty is what keeps the macho system going, so Mundin will want to protect Manuel. Lucinda works a version of her Catex custom officer trick. She complains to her brother that she's just gotten her period and needs to go home. I've got terrible cramps, Lucinda moans. Can't you take something for it? Mundin asks, inconvenienced and awed by the mysteries of the female body. Lucinda nods. It's at home, though. Mundin shakes his head at his sister. Nevertheless, he is her protector. Ever since her quip at the motel, he's been watching her closely. Okay, I'll take you. He turns to us, his cousins. You guys have to stay here and cover for Manuel. We can't stay here without you, we remind him. Rule numero uno, girls are not left unescorted in public. We'll get in trouble, Mundin. Mundin scowls. This is unexpected prissiness from us. Well, I'll tell them I left you here with some cousins who showed. Then, I'll come back for you. By then Fifi and Manuel should be done. Should be done. A cannon shot across the bow. No time for further delay. We smile, three churlish Che Guevara smiles. We're going with you. But what about Fifi and Manuel? Mundin is flabbergasted. If everyone except Fifi and Manuel shows up at the compound, the lovers will be in deep trouble. Rule numero dos, girls are not to be left unchaperoned with their novios. We came with you, we stay with you. We don't want to get into trouble. Our good girl voices don't quite convince our cousin. I won't do it. Mundin folds his hands on the table. We remind him of last night's outing to the motel. Should we mention that to his father? We know what sort of Damocles hangs over his head. An electric razor for the military school crookut Mundin would have to get. For just as we, his American cousins, are threatened with island confinement. Military school is what's in store for Mundin should he step out of line. He looks us straight in the eyes. What are you girls up to? He fires at us. We meet his look with bulletproof smiles, stone faces on which, with his myopic macho vision, he can't make out the writing on the walls. The compound driveway looks like a Mercedes-Benz car lot. A Jeep and 2 Japanese cars say some of the younger generation are also here. Lucinda spots Tia Fidelina and Tia Orlando's pale salmon Mercedes. This is going to be muy interesting, she whispers. The patio is packed with relatives. Mundin hurries over to the men's side, knowing the first bomb will explode among the women. We sisters go on our rounds, kissing all the aunts. Tia Fidelina's milky dark eyes are almost totally sightless. And which one is the novia V? She asks, squinting at her nieces. Yes, Mommy agrees. Where is Fifi? With Manuel, Sandy offers smoothly. Her tone implies we have no problem with that. Where are they? Mommy asks more emphatically. Carla shrugs. How should we know? There is an embarrassed silence in which the words her reputation are as palpable as if someone had hung a wedding dress in the air. Tia Carmen sighs. Tia Fidelina unfolds her fan of overly gorgeous roses. Tia Flor smiles wildly at the rest of us. And asks us if we had a nice time. Mommy looks past the crowd at Poppy, over there happily exchanging dictatorship stories with the other men. Steely-faced, she stands up and nods for us to follow her. The 3 of us single file behind Mommy into Tia Carmen's bedroom again, the scene of Mommy's courtroom. Tia comes along, counseling patience. Once the door is closed, Mommy loses her temper. First, she berates Carla, who as the oldest was in charge and had orders to stick with Manuel and Fifi as their in-car chaperone. Then, we get chapter and verse on being bad daughters. Finally, she swears, in front of our aunt, that Fifi is going back with us. If your father should find out. Our mother shakes her head, reviewing the consequences. Rather anticlimactically, she adds, a disgrace to the family. Yeah. Tia Carmen lifts her hand for her sister-in-law to stop. These girls have lived so long away, they have gotten American ways. American ways. Mommy cries. Fifi's been living here for 6 months. That's no excuse. There must be an explanation. Tia Carmen changes course. Let's not anticipate where the coconut will fall when the hurricane hasn't hit yet, she advises. Mommy shakes her head conclusively. If she can't behave herself here, she goes back with us, period. I'm not going to send them anymore to cause trouble. Tia Carmen puts her arms around us. Don't forget, these are my girls, too. And they're good girls, no trouble at all. What would I do, she looks up at us, if I didn't get to have them with me every year? We look at each other, and then, drop our gaze to hide our confusion. We are free at last, but here, just at the moment the gate swings open, and we can fly the coop, Tia Carmen's love revives our old homesickness. It's like this monkey experiment Carla read about in her clinical psych class. These baby monkeys were kept in a cage so long, they wouldn't come out when the doors were finally left open. Instead, they stayed inside and poked their arms through the bars for their food, just out of reach. It is close to midnight when we hear the pickup laboring up the driveway. Out on the patio, the visiting relatives have left, and only the compound folks remain, talking in low, preoccupied voices. In our bedroom, we have been defending ourselves to each other. We all know Fifi was headed for trouble with MG, she's only 16, we keep exclaiming. She thought she could be all island. We know better. But still, we feel rotten when a pale Fifi marches into our bedroom a while later after a grueling interrogation in Tia Carmen's bedroom. She says nothing to us but opens the closet and begins packing all her clothes. For a moment we panic. Is she going to elope with Manuel? What are you doing, Fifi? Yo-Yo asks. Fifi continues to pack from a pile of clothes she has emptied out of her drawers onto the floor. Silence. Fifi. Carla touches her shoulder. What happened? She means, of course, out in the patio or even since the dull, absent look on Fifi's face implies more before. Fifi turns to us, her eyes are red and weepy. Traitors, she says. The sound of her suitcase latching closed gives the accusation an eerie finality. At the door, she raises her chin proudly, and then we hear her steps echoing down the hall to our cousin Carmencita's room. We look at each other as if to say, she'll get over it. Meaning Manuel, meaning her fury at us, meaning her fear of her own life. Like ours, it lies ahead of her like a wilderness just before the first explorer sets foot on the virgin sand. Daughter of invention mommy, Poppy, Yo-Yo. For a period after they arrived in this country, Laura Garcia tried to invent something. Her ideas always came after the sightseeing visits she took with her daughters to department stores to see the wonders of this new country. On his free Sundays, Carlos carted the girls off to the Statue of Liberty or the Brooklyn Bridge or Rockefeller Center, but as far as Laura was concerned, these were men's wonders. Down in housewares were the true treasures women were after. Laura and her daughters would take the escalator, marveling at the moving staircase, she teasing them that this might be the ladder Jacob saw with angels moving up and down to heaven. The moment they lingered by a display, a perky saleslady approached, no doubt thinking a young mother with 4 girls in tow fit the perfect profile for the new refrigerator with automatic defrost or the heavy-duty washing machine with the pre-wash soak cycle. Laura paid close attention during the demonstrations, asking intelligent questions, but at the last minute 133. Saying she would talk it over with her husband. On the drive home, try as they might, her daughters could not engage their mother in conversation, for inspired by what she had just seen, Laura had begun inventing. She never put anything actual on paper until she had settled her house down at night. On his side of the bed her husband would be conked out for an hour already, his Spanish newspapers draped over his chest, his glasses propped up on his bedside table, looking out eerily at the darkened room like a disembodied bodyguard. In her lighted corner, pillows propped behind her, Laura sat up inventing. On her lap lay one of those innumerable pads of paper her husband brought home from his office, compliments of some pharmaceutical company, advertising tranquilizers, or antibiotics or skin cream. She would be working on a sketch of something familiar but drawn at such close range so she could attach a special nozzle or handier handle. The thing looked peculiar. Her daughters would giggle over the odd doodles they found in kitchen drawers or on the back shelf of the downstairs toilet. Once Yo-Yo was sure her mother had drawn a picture of a man's you-know-what, she showed her sisters her find, and with coy, posed faces they inquired of their mother what she was up to. That was one of her failures, she explained to them, a child's double-compartment drinking glass with an outsized, built-in straw. Her daughters would seek her out at night when she seemed to have a moment to talk to them, they were having trouble at school or they wanted her to persuade their father to give them permission to go into the city or to a shopping mall or a movie in broad daylight. Mommy. Laura would wave them out of her room. The problem with you girls. The problem boiled down to the fact that they wanted to become Americans and their father and their mother, too, at first would have none of it. You girls are going to drive me crazy, she threatened, if they kept nagging. When I end up in Bellevue, you'll be safely sorry. She spoke in English when she argued with them. And her English was a mishmash of mixed-up idioms and sayings that showed she was green behind the ears, as she called it. If her husband insisted she speak in Spanish to the girls so they wouldn't forget their native tongue, she'd snap, when in Rome, do unto the Romans. Yo-Yo, the big mouth, had become the spokesman for her sisters, and she stood her ground in that bedroom. We're not going to that school anymore, Mommy. You have to. Her eyes would widen with worry. In this country, it is against the law not to go to school. You want us to get thrown out? You want us to get killed? Those kids were throwing stones today. Sticks and stones don't break bones, she chanted. Yo-Yo could tell, though, by the look on her face, it was as if one of those stones the kids had aimed at her daughters had hit her. But she always pretended they were at fault. What did you do to provoke them? It takes two to tangle, you know. Thanks a lot, Mom. Yo-Yo stormed out of that room and into her own. Her daughters never called her mom except when they wanted her to feel how much she had failed them in this country. She was a good enough mommy, fussing and scolding and giving advice, but a terrible girlfriend parent, a real failure of a mom. Back she went to her pencil and pad, scribbling, and skiing and tearing off sheets, finally giving up, and taking up her New York Times. Some nights, though, if she got a good idea, she rushed into Yo-Yo's room, a flushed look on her face, her tablet of paper in her hand, a cursory knock on the door she'd just thrown open. "Do I have something to show you, Cuquita?" This was Yo-Yo's time to herself, after she finished her homework, while her sisters were still downstairs watching TV in the basement. Hunched over her small desk, the overhead light turned off, her desk lamp poignantly lighting only her paper, the rest of the room in warm, soft, uncreated darkness. She wrote her secret poems in her new language. "You're going to ruin your eyes," Laura began, snapping on the overly bright overhead light, scaring off whatever shy passion Yo-Yo, with the blue thread of her writing, had just begun coaxing out of a labyrinth of feelings. "Oh, Mommy!" Yo-Yo cried out, her eyes blinking up at her mother. "I'm writing. Cuquita." That was her communal pet name for whoever was in her favor. "Cuquita, when I make $1 million, I'll buy you your very own typewriter." Yo-Yo had been nagging her mother for one just like the one her father had bought to do his order forms at home. "Gravy on the turkey" was what she called it when someone was buttering her up. She buttered and poured. "I'll hire you your very own typist." Down she plopped on the bed and held out her pad. "Take a guess, Cuquita." Yo-Yo studied the rough sketch a moment. "Soap sprayed from the nozzle head of a shower when you turned the knob a certain way? Instant coffee with creamer already mixed in? Time-released water capsules for your potted plants when you were away? A keychain with a timer that would go off when your parking meter was about to expire? The ticking would help you find your keys easily if you mislaid them. The famous one, famous only in hindsight, was the stick person dragging a square by a rope a suitcase with wheels." "Oh, of course," Yo-Yo said, humoring her. "What every household needs, a shower like a car wash, keys ticking like a bomb, luggage on a leash." By now, it had become something of a family joke, their Thomas Edison mommy, their Benjamin Franklin mom. Her face fell. "Come on now. Use your head. One more wrong guess, and she'd show Yo-Yo, pointing with her pencil to the different highlights of this incredible new wonder. "Remember that time we took the car to Bear Mountain, and we realized that we had forgotten to pack an opener with our picnic?" Her daughters kept correcting her, but she insisted this was how it should be said. "When we were ready to eat we didn't have any way to open the refreshments cans." This before flip-top lids, which she claimed had crossed her mind. "You know what this is now?" Yo-Yo shook her head. "Is a car bumper, but see, this part is a removable can opener. So simple and yet so necessary, eh?" "Yeah, Mommy. You should patent it." Yo-Yo shrugged as her mother tore off the scratch paper and folded it, carefully, corner to corner, as if she were going to save it. But then, she tossed it in the waste basket on her way out of the room and gave a little laugh like a disclaimer. It's half of one or 2 dozen of another. None of her daughters was very encouraging. They resented her spending time on those dumb inventions. Here they were trying to fit in America among Americans. They needed help figuring out who they were, why the Irish kids whose grandparents had been mixed were calling them spies. Why had they come to this country in the first place? Important, crucial, final things, and here was their own mother, who didn't have a second to help them puzzle any of this out, inventing gadgets to make life easier for the American moms. Sometimes Yo-Yo challenged her. "Why, Mommy? Why do it? You're never going to make money. The Americans have already thought of everything, you know that." "Maybe not. Maybe, just maybe, there's something they've missed that's important. With patience and calm, even a burro can climb a palm." This last was one of her many Dominican sayings she had imported into her scrambled English. "But what's the point?" Yo-Yo persisted. Point? Does everything need a point? Why do you write poems?" Yo-Yo had to admit it was her mother who had the point there. Still, in the hierarchy of things, a poem seemed much more important than a potty that played music when a toilet-training toddler went in its bowl. They talked about it among themselves, the 4 girls, as they often did now about the many puzzling things in this new country. "Better she reinvents the wheel than be on our cases all the time / the oldest," Carla observed. In the close quarters of an American nuclear family, their mother's prodigious energy was becoming a real drain on their self-determination. Let her have a project. What harm could she do? And besides, she needed that acknowledgement. It had come to her automatically in the old country from being a de la Torre. Garcia de la Torre, Laura would enunciate carefully, giving her maiden as well as married name when they first arrived. But the blank smiles had never heard of her name. She would show them. She would prove to these Americans what a smart woman could do with a pencil and pad. She had a near miss once. Every night, she liked to read the New York Times in bed before turning off her light, to see what the Americans were up to. One night, she let out a yelp to wake up her husband beside her. He sat bolt upright, reaching for his glasses, which in his haste, he knocked across the room. "¿Qué pasa? ¿Y qué pasó? What is wrong?" There was terror in his voice, the same fear she'd heard in the Dominican Republic before they left. They had been watched there. He was followed. They could not talk, of course, though they had whispered to each other in fear at night in the dark bed. Now in America, he was safe, a success even. His Centro de Medicina in the Bronx was thronged with the sick and the homesick yearning to go home again. But in dreams, he went back to those awful days and long nights, and his wife's screams confirmed his secret fear. They had not gotten away after all. The sim had come for them at last. "Ay, Cuco. Remember how I showed you that suitcase with little wheels so we should not have to carry those heavy bags when we traveled? Someone stole my idea and made $1 million. She shook the paper in his face. See. This man was no bobo. He didn't put all his pokers on a back burner. I kept telling you, one of these days my ship would pass me by in the night." She wagged her finger at her husband and daughters, laughing all the while, one of those eerie laughs crazy people in movies laugh. The 4 girls had congregated in her room. They eyed their mother and each other. Perhaps they were all thinking the same thing. Wouldn't it be weird and sad if Mommy did end up in Bellevue? Yeah, y'all, she waved them out of her room at last. There is no use trying to drink spilt milk, that's for sure. It was the suitcase rollers that stopped Laura's hand. She had weather-vaned a minor brainstorm. And yet, this plagiarist had gotten all the credit, and the money. What use was it trying to compete with the Americans? They would always have the head start. It was their country, after all. Best stick close to home. She cast her sights about her daughter's duct and found her husband's office in need. Several days a week, dressed professionally in a white smock with a little name tag pinned on the lapel, a shopping bag full of cleaning materials and rags, she rode with her husband in his car to the Bronx. On the way, she organized the glove compartment or took off the address stickers from the magazines for the waiting room because she had read somewhere how by means of these stickers drug addict patients found out where doctors lived and burglarized their homes looking for syringes. At night, she did the books, filling in columns with how much money they had made that day. Who had time to be inventing silly things? She did take up her pencil and pad one last time. But it was to help one of her daughters out. In 9th grade, Yo-Yo was chosen by her English teacher, Sister Mary Joseph, to deliver the Teacher's Day address at the school assembly. Back in the Dominican Republic growing up, Yo-Yo had been a terrible student. No one could ever get her to sit down to a book. But in New York, she needed to settle somewhere, and since the natives were unfriendly, and the country inhospitable, she took root in the language. By high school, the nuns were reading her stories and compositions out loud in English class. But the specter of delivering a speech brown-nosing the teachers jammed her imagination. At first she didn't want to, and then she couldn't seem to write that speech. She should have thought of it as a great honor, as her father called it. But she was mortified. She still had a slight accent, and she did not like to speak in public, subjecting herself to her classmates' ridicule. It also took no great figuring to see that to deliver a eulogy for a convent full of crazy, old, overweight nuns was no way to endear herself to her peers. But she didn't know how to get out of it. Night after night, she sat at her desk, hoping to polish off some quick, non-committal little speech. But she couldn't get anything down. The weekend before the assembly Monday morning, Yo-Yo went into a panic. Her mother would just have to call in tomorrow and say Yo-Yo was in the hospital, in a coma. Laura tried to calm her down. Just remember how Mr. Lincoln couldn't think of anything to say at the Gettysburg, but then, bang. 40 once upon a time ago, she began reciting. Something is going to come if you just relax. You'll see, like the Americans say, necessity is the daughter of invention. I'll help you. That weekend, her mother turned all her energy towards helping Yo-Yo write her speech. Please, Mommy, just leave me alone, please, Yo-Yo pleaded with her. But Yo-Yo would get rid of the goose only to have to contend with the gander. Her father kept poking his head in the door just to see if Yo-Yo had fulfilled your obligations, a phrase he had used when the girls were younger, and he'd check to see whether they had gone to the bathroom before a car trip. Several times that weekend around the supper table, he recited his own high school valedictorian speech. He gave Yo-Yo pointers on delivery, notes on the great orators and their tricks. Humbleness and praise and falling silent with great emotion were his favorites. Laura sat across the table, the only one who seemed to be listening to him. Yo-Yo and her sisters were forgetting a lot of their Spanish, and their father's formal, florid diction was hard to understand. But Laura smiled softly to herself, and turned the lazy Susan at the center of the table around and around as if it were the prime mover, the first gear of her attention. That Sunday evening, Yo-Yo was reading some poetry to get herself inspired, Whitman's poems in an old book with an engraved cover her father had picked up in a thrift shop next to his office. Celebrate myself and sing myself. He most honors my style who learns under it to destroy the teacher. The poet's words shocked and thrilled her. She had gotten used to the nuns, a literature of appropriate sentiments, poems with a message, expurgated texts. But here was a flesh and blood man, belching, and laughing and sweating in poems. Who touches this book touches a man. That night, at last, she started to write, recklessly, 5 pages, looking up once only to see her father passing by the hall on tiptoe. When Yo-Yo was done, she read over her words, and her eyes filled. She finally sounded like herself in English. As soon as she had finished that first draft, she called her mother to her room. Laura listened attentively while Yo-Yo read the speech out loud, and in the end, her eyes were glistening too. Her face was soft and warm and proud. Yo-Yo, you are going to be the one to bring our name to the headlights in this country. That is a beautiful, beautiful speech. I want for your father to hear it before he goes to sleep. Then I will type it for you, all right. Down the hall they went, mother and daughter, faces flushed with accomplishment. Into the master bedroom where Carlos was propped up on his pillows, still awake, reading the Dominican papers, already days old. Now that the dictatorship had been toppled, he had become interested in his country's fate again. The interim government was going to hold the first free elections in 30 years. History was in the making, freedom and hope were in the air again. There was still some question in his mind whether or not he might move his family back. But Laura had gotten used to the life here. She did not want to go back to the old country where, de la Torre or not, she was only a wife and a mother, and a failed one at that, since she had never provided the required son. Better an independent nobody than a high-class house slave. She did not come straight out and disagree with her husband's plans. Instead, she fussed with him about reading the papers in bed, soiling their sheets with those poorly printed, foreign tabloids. The Times is not that bad, she'd claim if her husband tried to humor her by saying they shared the same dirty habit. The minute Carlos saw his wife and daughter filing in, he put his paper down, and his face brightened as if at long last his wife had delivered the son, and that was the news she was bringing him. His teeth were already grinning from the glass of water next to his bedside lamp, so he lisped when he said, "Speech, speech. It is so beautiful, Cuco," Laura coached him, turning the sound on his TV off. She sat down at the foot of the bed. Yo-Yo stood before both of them, blocking their view of the soldiers in helicopters landing amid silenced gun reports and explosions. A few weeks ago it had been the shores of the Dominican Republic. Now it was the jungles of Southeast Asia they were saving. Her mother gave her the nod to begin reading. Yo-Yo didn't need much encouragement. She put her nose to the fire, as her mother would have said, and read from start to finish without looking up. When she concluded, she was a little embarrassed at the pride she took in her own words. She pretended to quibble with a phrase or two, then looked questioningly to her mother. Laura's face was radiant. Yo-Yo turned to share her pride with her father. The expression on his face shocked both mother and daughter. Carlos's toothless mouth had collapsed into a dark zero. His eyes bored into Yo-Yo, then shifted to Laura. In barely audible Spanish, as if secret microphones or informers were all about, he whispered to his wife, "You will permit her to read that?" Laura's eyebrows shot up, her mouth fell open. In the old country, any whisper of a challenge to authority could bring the secret police in their black VWS. But this was America. People could say what they thought. "What is wrong with her speech?" Laura questioned him. What is wrong with her speech? Carlos wagged his head at her. His anger was always more frightening in his broken English. As if he had mutilated the language in his fury, and now there was nothing to stand between them and his raw, dumb anger. What is wrong? I will tell you what is wrong. It show no gratitude. It is boastful. Celebrate myself. The best student learns to destroy the teacher. He mocked Yo-Yo's plagiarized words. That is insubordinate. It is improper. It is disrespecting of her teachers. In his anger he had forgotten his fear of lurking spies. Each wrong he voiced was a decibel higher than the last outrage. Finally, he shouted at Yo-Yo, as your father, I forbid you to make that speech. Laura leapt to her feet, a sign that she was about to deliver her own speech. She was a small woman, and she spoke all her pronouncements standing up, either for more projection or as a carryover from her girlhood in convent schools where one asked for, and literally, took the floor in order to speak. She stood by Yo-Yo's side, shoulder to shoulder. They looked down at Carlos. That is no tone of voice, she began. But now, Carlos was truly furious. It was bad enough that his daughter was rebelling, but here was his own wife joining forces with her. Soon he would be surrounded by a house full of independent American women. He too leapt from the bed, throwing off his covers. The Spanish newspapers flew across the room. He snatched the speech out of Yo-Yo's hands, held it before the girl's wide eyes, a vengeful, mad look in his own, and then once, twice, 3, 4, countless times, he tore the speech into shreds. Are you crazy? Laura lunged at him. Have you gone mad? That is her speech for tomorrow you have torn up. Have you gone mad? He shook her away. You were going to let her read that insult to her teachers. Insult to her teachers. Laura's face had crumpled up like a piece of paper. On it was written a love note to her husband, an unhappy, haunted man. This is America, Poppy, America. You are not in a savage country anymore. Meanwhile, Yo-Yo was on her knees, weeping wildly, collecting all the little pieces of her speech, hoping that she could put it back together before the assembly tomorrow morning. But not even a Sybil could have made sense of those tiny scraps of paper. All hope was lost. He broke it, Yo-Yo moaned as she picked up a handful of pieces. Probably, if she had thought a moment about it, she would not have done what she did next. She would have realized her father had lost brothers and friends to the dictator Trujillo. For the rest of his life, he would be haunted by blood in the streets and late-night disappearances. Even after all these years, he cringed if a black Volkswagen passed him on the street. He feared anyone in uniform, the meter maid giving out parking tickets, a museum guard approaching to tell him not to get too close to his favorite Goya. On her knees, Yo-Yo thought of the worst thing she could say to her father. She gathered a handful of scraps, stood up, and hurled them in his face. In a low, ugly whisper, she pronounced Trujillo's hated nickname, Chapita. You're just another Chapita. It took Yo-Yo's father only a moment to register the loathsome nickname before he came after her. Down the halls they raced, but Yo-Yo was quicker than he and made it into her room just in time to lock the door as her father threw his weight against it. He called down curses on her head, ordered her on his authority as her father to open that door. He throttled that doorknob, but all to no avail. Her mother's love of gadgets saved Yo-Yo's hide that night. Laura had hired a locksmith to install good locks on all the bedroom doors after the house had been broken into once while they were away. Now if burglars broke in again, and the family were at home, there would be a second round of locks for the thieves to contend with. Lolo, she said, trying to calm him down. Don't you ruin my new locks. Finally he did calm down, his anger spent. Yo-Yo heard their footsteps retreating down the hall. Their door clicked shut. Then, muffled voices, her mother's rising in anger, in persuasion, her father's deeper murmurs of explanation and self-defense. The house fell silent a moment, before Yo-Yo heard, far off, the gun blasts and explosions, the serious, self-important voices of newscasters reporting their TV war. A little while later, there was a quiet knock at Yo-Yo's door, followed by a tentative attempt at the doorknob. Cuquita, her mother whispered. Open up, Cuquita. Go away, Yo-Yo wailed, but they both knew she was glad her mother was there, and needed only a moment's protest to save face. Together they concocted a speech, 2 brief pages of stale compliments and the polite commonplaces on teachers, a speech wrought by necessity and without much invention by mother and daughter late into the night on one of the pads of paper Laura had once used for her own inventions. After it was drafted, Laura typed it up while Yo-Yo stood by, correcting her mother's misnomers and missayings. Yo-Yo came home the next day with the success story of the assembly. The nuns had been flattered, the audience had stood up and given our devoted teachers a standing ovation / what Laura had suggested they do at the end of the speech. She clapped her hands together as Yo-Yo recreated the moment. "I stole that from your father's speech, remember? Remember how he put that in at the end?" She quoted him in Spanish, then translated for Yo-Yo into English. That night, Yo-Yo watched him from the upstairs hall window, where she'd retreated the minute she heard his car pull up in front of the house. Slowly, her father came up the driveway, a grim expression on his face as he grappled with a large, heavy cardboard box. At the front door, he set the package down carefully and patted all his pockets for his house keys. If only he'd had Laura's ticking keychain. Yo-Yo heard the snapping open of locks downstairs. She listened as he struggled to maneuver the box through the narrow doorway. He called her name several times, but she did not answer him. "My daughter, your father, he love you very much," he explained from the bottom of the stairs. "He just want to protect you." Finally, her mother came up and pleaded with Yo-Yo to go down and reconcile with him. "Your father did not mean to harm. You must pardon him. Always it is better to let bygones be forgotten, no." Downstairs, Yo-Yo found her father setting up a brand new electric typewriter on the kitchen table. It was even better than her mother's. He had outdone himself with all the extra features: a plastic carrying case with Yo-Yo's initials deckled below the handle, a brace to lift the paper upright while she typed, an erase cartridge, an automatic margin tab, a plastic hood like a toaster cover to keep the dust away. Not even her mother could have invented such a machine. But Laura's inventing days were over just as Yo-Yo's were starting up with her school-wide success. Rather than the rolling suitcase everyone else in the family remembers, Yo-Yo thinks of the speech her mother wrote as her last invention. It was as if, after that, her mother had passed on to Yo-Yo her pencil and pad and said, "Okay, Cuquita, here's the book. You give it a shot." Trespass Carla. The day the Garcias were 1 American year old, they had a celebration at dinner. Mommy had baked a nice flan and stuck a candle in the center. "Guess what day it is today?" She looked around the table at her daughter's baffled faces. 1 year ago today / Poppy began orating, "We came to the shores of this great country." When he was done misquoting the poem on the Statue of Liberty, the youngest, Fifi, asked if she could blow out the candle, and Mommy said, "Only after everyone had made a wish."